Thank you, snowboarding.
Thank you, snowboarding.
Hey friends, Happy New Year. Welcome back to Thank You Snowboarding, the podcast that is diving into UK snowboard culture, past and present. And it's all done with a lot of love and support from the Snowboard Asylum. And they've been looking after snowboarders for a long time. So it's quite right that they look after this podcast too. This week, we are talking to my brother, David Cracknell. When I had the idea for this podcast, I knew that at some point I would want to speak to him about his journey. And it's quite interesting talking to him about some of this stuff because obviously I've only seen it from my standpoint. So getting his views on some things and hearing his story through his interpretation of it is really interesting. Dave had a good run, sort of late 90s through the early 2000s. He rode for Airwalk for a time, for West Beach, Duotone, PlayStation. I remember we used to get free PlayStation games. That was always a win. Crash Bandicoot seems to be the standout memory of those games. He had a good time and took it quite far, and we talk about like some of those things and to where he is now. He ended up on the cover of a CD called Snowboard Generation that was quite popular around the country and certainly got some publicity. He did all right, and he certainly was, and I assume is still a great snowboarder and one of the people I've enjoyed going snowboarding with the most. A little example of this, he turned up in Les Arcs after having, I think, 3 years off just after he'd had kids. And I think on the first morning it just snowed, we went up and, I picked a line through some cliffs and he did this double drop straight off the bat. It was like being fired out of a gun, like he'd not spent any time off it at all. And he is that good, loads of natural talent and a good sensibility, and he likes getting at it. So it's interesting to see where he is now with snowboarding and basically to relive some of the fun times we've had together as well. It was a real pleasure. Took quite a lot of editing this one, but it was a joy, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did making it. And I'll be back at the end for some housekeeping as usual. Here we go, David Cracknell.
I remember there being a conversation at some point about me having dyslexia, but it was never tested. And it kind of went it didn't get dealt with. It was just like, oh, he might be dyslexic. That's the end of it. But I struggled at school, like ridiculously struggled. And then I found snowboarding through a mixture of stuff on TV and your influence of being at the dry slope. And then something about that was like, I understood it. Yeah, so coming from like the school environment, secondary school environment, where I didn't really understand what was going on and what was expected of me. Then you had then you had snowboarding, and it was like, I get it. I could probably do that. So then I went to the dry slope with my board, taught myself how to turn, and it was like, right, I can get across the slope on my heels, then I can get across the slope on my toes, then I can link a turn, I can go from heels to toes and then from toes to heels, and there was a real progression. I could feel the progression, like, I'm getting better, I can do this, and that wasn't something that I was getting at school. So that became, I would say, fairly addictive. So then it was like, right, then they started having their snowboard nights at the dry slope, and then it's like, right, we've got to jump now, and I'd watched like Critical Conditions and Snowboarders in Exile, so many times. I knew what all the grabs were, so it was like, right, get off the jump, grab the board indie, grab the board tail grab the board melon. It was just like crossing them off, right, got that one, can do that one, on this massive, great big board that I had.
Like a 160, wasn't it?
It was a one. I think it was a 155, but I was a short 13-year-old. Yeah, and it had my stance was like Frank Screm stance, so narrow. Just T-bolted through the board on this giant ski. So then getting into like spinning, and that didn't really happen on that board.
No.
But that progression was like, oh, okay, right, look, I'm learning. Like I like this. I can do this. I understand it. I know what's going on. And I think that's probably what then, that was what hooked me into snowboarding, because it made me feel good, because it made me feel like I was achieving something.
Yeah, like they put that down sort of being neurodivergent now.
Yeah.
But that I don't know if disability is the right word, and I certainly don't want to offend anyone, but sort of that thing doesn't then hold you back. It's not something that holds you back. If anything, it probably helps in a way, because you focus in on more. Yeah,
well, I became quite obsessive about snowboarding, that's for sure. Like, that was everything. Going as many times a week as you could to many different, to different dry slopes, all, around London. Just constantly just trying to learn new tricks or do the tricks that you could do better or become more consistent at them. It was a never ending like bag of, that you would never beat it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would just keep going and going and going. And that's basically, that progression and learning then led into like other opportunities that, I didn't ever think I would, so like writing for Snowboard UK or White Lines. Like I never thought I'd, as a dyslexic person who couldn't really spell, and was sort of considered to be like at the bottom end of the school ability spectrum, I never thought that I'd get an opportunity not only to write for the magazines but to be assistant editor at Snowboard UK for a season.
Yeah.
And those experiences I think probably gave me a lot of confidence that anything was possible.
Yeah,
so
I think it's fair to say that school didn't really treat you well because you weren't unable to learn. You were unable to do one specific thing, and that held you back. And I mean, you've gone on sort of since then to prove that you're clearly bright enough and motivated enough to achieve whatever you sort of set your mind to.
Absolutely, and I think that's what snowboarding has given me. It's giving me that try, you might not do it first time, but try again, and you will do it. Like it will happen. You just have to keep trying. And that's what, what a great life lesson that is to have, because it's like lots of people get put off if they fail once, but that's just part of the process. And that's what snowboarding taught me, or has taught me, is that the more times you try it, you're going to get a little bit closer every time until you finally succeed. And failure or not achieving something isn't actually anything to be worried about. In fact, it should be encouraged, because that's the thing that gets you to where you want to be, whether it's, your first turn or a 360 or writing a CV for a job or a job interview or whatever. That skill is completely transferable across everything, and snowboarding opened that up to me, definitely.
Did you ever ski?
Yeah. So then you had the job at the dry slope, which then I would see, because we would come and pick you up and drop you off, do you know what I mean, with mum and dad. And then it was like, oh, okay, the school were doing a ski trip.
Yeah.
And you're 13, you're the youngest, you can go on it, but you're like the youngest that they'll let you go to the ski trip. So it was like, all right, cool. So then I went to the dry slope, which was Bromley Dry Slope, known as Profiles to us back then. And by all accounts, on the site where they buried a load of gold bullion from the Mac train robbery.
What's his name? Ted Summit or other?
Yeah, he built a leisure centre on top of where he buried the Brinkmat gold bullion. But anyway, So
Allegedly.
So yeah, so that was the rumour that was always there. But so then I went and had a ski lesson. I had a couple of ski lessons,
Right.
and like everything, like at that age, I really didn't have a clue what was going on ever.
Right. Yeah.
So I remember having a ski lesson, and then it was fine, and then I had another one about 6 months later. I was like, well, I'm having the second lesson, not the first lesson. I've done the first lesson, but it was so long ago I'd completely forgotten what everything was.
Yeah.
So they take you to the top of the slope, and then they say, right, go into snowplow. And I thought snowplow meant just parallel skis. So I just dropped in at the top with the skis pointing forward and went straight down towards the ski tech, like the building. But luckily the doors were open and I went flying into where everyone gets their boots on. So off the slope, along the drive it, and then into the building. And it was just like, that was really lucky that the doors were open. And then I went on the ski trip. Like in my full-on, went to the ski show to get my outfit.
Where did you go on the ski
We
trip?
went to, it was Austria, and I want to say it was somewhere like Meyerhofen or somewhere, but like this was like, there was one lift up, like there was this one single-seater lift that took you all the way into like the ski area when there was then loads of other lifts, but it was like the sketchiest lift ever.
Yeah.
And you're never been on a chairlift before. And the first time you're on a chairlift, you're on it on your own. Like, good luck. Yeah. So we were there for the week, and that was great. It was something completely different. Like, never been in that environment before. And everyone was skiing. Snowboarding wasn't even a thing then. Like, it was a thing, but it wasn't. Nothing like it wasn't like going to be available going on a school ski trip. And I don't even remember ever seeing someone snowboarding when we were there. But what I remember is going to the ski show.
Yeah.
And being like, I need an outfit. So it was like C&A. Let's get to C&A. And there's a photo around somewhere of like, it was like I went for the pink trousers. I had this like matching top, but it wasn't pink, but it had pink sort of bits on it. And it didn't have like the little avalanche transceiver. I went for the brand below that. They had their own one that had like a little chip in it that would find you if you got buried in an avalanche, but that was too expensive. And I had these really hideous block sunglasses and a thermal hypercolour pink cap. So I was fully, and there's a picture, I remember my nan had it on her mantelpiece of that, so I'd see it all the time. And it's epic as a first outfit. It's great. But we did that and then came back. And then obviously having done that, you were still going to the dry slope all the time. And I'm not quite sure how you transitioned from skiing to snowboarding. But I remember you coming home with videos from, you said earlier, like Critical Conditions and Snowboarders in Exile, that had like all the sort of Sean Palmer and Chris Roach and like Noah Selaznick and all like the early pioneers over there of like freestyle snowboarding. And we would just watch them again and again and again and again. Like, it just never got boring.
No.
And then every now and then it would be on TV, so like on High Five, and you would see that and it would be like, oh my God, this just looks like the best thing ever. Yeah. But I had a bit of a tendency when I was young to have different fads. So like I would just get into something, want all the kit, and as soon as I had all the kit, just give it up.
Archery is
like,
the one I remember.
Yeah, and I've still got the bow in the loft still. Yeah, I have, yeah. Sometimes we get it out in the garden and just set up a target. But anyway, so... And there was something about snowboarding that I didn't want to do that with. I knew from the very beginning that that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to just be given all the stuff and go and do it and give it up. So I saved up. Yeah. So I saved my money, and then I bought my first board from the back of a magazine catalogue. So in the back of the magazines, you would have like, the shop was Grand Prix. Yeah, which did that turn into...
Ed mentions this as the Grand Prix ads that had, like, at the bottom they'd have some second-hand listings.
Yeah, well,
that's where I got my first board from.
Yeah, okay. So this was like... Yeah, it was... I remember it with skateboarding as well, in like Rad Magazine. Like you would have... It's basically just a page of a catalogue in there. It'd have all the boards, and it would have a price underneath, and then you would just phone them up and say, right, I wanted this. So my first board was a Rossignol Freestyle 155, and I was 13, so it was like massive for me.
Didn't it have plate bindings?
No, it had the bindings. They just asked me if I was regular or goofy, so I said I was regular, and then they just T-bolted the bindings onto the board, which now is like basically. They put a T-bolt is the equivalent of an insert, but they would drill the hole through the board and put this so you could see each binding. You could see 4 metal inserts from underneath. The base was gone where they were, so they just put them on. I got no choice in my stance. They just bolted them on, and so I could change the angles, but I couldn't change the width. And it was kind of set back because although it was called the Freestyle, it looked like a giant ski. And so I would take that to the dry slope. So I hadn't even snowboarded. I bought my snowboard before I'd even tried snowboarding.
Really? Didn't know that.
Yeah. So I bought the board, and then I would go to the dry slope, and they would say, can you control, turn, ski, and stop? And it's like, yep, I can do all of them, even though I've never even stepped on a snowboard before. And I would just walk up to the first exit on like one side and just do like either a heel or toe turn all the way over to the other side to the bottom.
Yeah.
And then I would get the lift up on the other side and just do it the opposite. So toe side all the way across to the bottom.
Yeah.
And I would just do that. So it's like an X, just doing that for hours. And then I slowly started to turn. So I bought this board, and then I taught myself how to snowboard.
That's amazing. I think, did you do that when I'd already gone away for my first season? Because I don't remember any of this, so I don't think I was around for that. Yeah,
you'd gone to Val d'Isère, and I knew I was coming out to visit you.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was all prep work. Right, I need to be able to snowboard before I go.
Yeah.
And I still think like I had the Rossignol board, whatever bindings came with that, I don't know, probably Rossignol, I suppose. And then I had Northwave Arrow boots, which I still think today are the most comfiest boots. I was looking for some on eBay recently just because they're so comfy. And when you've got bad ankles and knees, you just need wellies, like to take the pressure off everything else.
But they were like the entry-level boots that everyone must have sold so many pairs of those.
Yeah, and then the rest of I don't know what I had the rest of the kit, but and then so I just did that so that I could turn before I came to Val d'Isère.
Yeah.
And then somehow we managed to wait. I don't know how we did this because, like, looking back now, I just think, what were they thinking? But it was like you were in Val d'Isère.
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning,
right?
Actually.
And they said, and I was like, I'm going to Val d'Isère. And they're like, okay, cool. I've been to France before, but I've never been on a plane, right? Ever. So the first time I'm put on a plane, I'm walked to the gate by just a random stranger.
Yeah.
Put on the plane. And there's no one to meet me at the other end.
No, there wouldn't have been.
I had to find someone that you knew who was doing transfers. So I'd never been on a plane, landed at an airport, and then I had to find the coach station and then find just this random person.
And you were like 13.
13. I was 13.
Right.
Yeah, and I had to find this random person.
Yeah.
That would then say, sit, and then hope that he knew where you were in Val d'Isère.
Yeah.
Yeah? Because there was no other way of making contact.
That's so fucked.
And I don't know how I got there. And then he was like, for some reason, he knew where you were when we got there. There was no mobile phones or anything like that.
No.
So he knew where you were. You were in... Right, so then we get to you were in a place called GJ's or something. GJ's. Which... Or something like that, which was made...
It was Gregor, wasn't it, who owned G?
Well, I don't know, but that was made epic by Simon Smith and Posse, who were in the Chaos movie.
The Chaos movie, yeah.
Yeah, which we had.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd watched that. That was UK first snowboard, skateboard, BMX, which were all the things that I was into.
Yeah.
So it was like, fuck, we're going to GJ's. they're in GJ's, wicked. I'm 13, I turn up and you're like, do you want a beer? And I'm like, yeah, I'll have a beer. So I'm drinking beer in the pub.
I'm so sorry.
And then it's like, it was just amazing. You know, just all of just everything was new and exciting, and like, didn't give it the thought of really what was going on. No. Just did it. No fear at all. And then we spent the week in Val d'Isère, which was kind of, I suppose from my point of view, I remember like one day of snowboarding, just cruising along and it being like wicked. Just, on the piece, just turning around, like like really lovely. But the rest of it, I didn't really enjoy that much, because you were living in a basement under the chalet that had rats in it. And I can remember sitting there talking to you, and just this rat just popped out next to your shoulder of the block work. And I was like, what? Like, just, fuck, we're sleeping somewhere where we're sleeping in a rat-infested basement.
Yeah, I can see now how that's... just thinking about it, I seem to remember that your sort of mood started dipping the longer you were there.
Yeah.
And I guess it was tough. It was a kind of a brutal introduction. Like, it's a tough way to go and be on holiday.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't like, the holidays that we had as a family where we might stay in like a villa or something, and it was all
grim.
It was grim. And then I remember I got sunstroke.
Yeah. And
you were working washing dishes or whatever, and I came one night and I ended up chucking up all over the kitchen like proper exorcist projectile vomit. Like, I've never been sick like that before or since. And then the next day, the people that worked in the chalet basically let me stay in the chalet, like let me just stay on the sofa in the chalet.
Right.
And that was like such a relief. I can remember it being like, oh, fucking hell, I'm not in the basement today. Like, it was really nice. But saying that, but then I came home, again, managed to get home okay. Don't really remember getting home. But there was something, like, even though it wasn't perfect, there was something about it that had hooked me.
Yeah.
And then the dry slope where I'd been teaching myself, it turned out that there was a freestyle night, like a snowboard night.
Yeah.
On a Tuesday night. So it was like, all right, I'm gonna go and check that out. And I can remember going down, and the jump was like, there was one jump and it was tiny. But in the first night, it was like jumping off that, indie, melon. I knew what all the grabs were because I'd watched the videos, and it was like boom, 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 just tail grab, like all of them. Just the only one that was difficult was the backside air, like the method.
Yeah.
All the others, you just got them, and then there was like 4, 5, maybe 6 other people down there all doing the same thing, and then everything changed at that point, because it was like, right, now there's a group of people who all live fairly locally.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to meet there on a Tuesday night, get the jump out, and just do that all night.
Yeah.
And that is basically what happened for the next 5 years.
So my second season I did with Toby, we went to Les Arts, and you came out to that, and you turned up with a brushy that was some sort of our dad trying to pay a bit less tax or something, so spending a bit of money on stuff that he could put through the books somehow.
I don't remember. I mean, I don't know how I got it.
That.
I don't remember how I got it. I just remember having it.
But I don't know, it just seemed to be like that. And then when you came out that time, there was definitely like a, fucking hell, he's getting good.
So so I can remember the very moment that something clicked. Okay. Now, it starts with an episode of Bored Stupid.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, obviously, Phil Young, Normski. What a legend.
Big up Normski.
Yeah.
He's on the list.
Is he? He should be.
He's definitely on the list.
All these people should be on the list, to be honest.
I think most of them are.
So they had an episode, and they were somewhere, and I think in the episode they had Jake Phelps from Thrasher magazine on it,
Yeah.
And they were talking about, what I can remember is they were talking about like frontside airs, backside, you know,
I
like the
remember
whole
exactly.
the whole argument, is it a backside air? Is it a frontside grab? Like, I can't remember, but
Can you do a front? Basically, is there such a thing as a frontside indie?
Yeah.
And he was saying
no,
that it isn't. It's just not a thing.
It's a frontside air.
And snowboarders were saying, yeah, it's a frontside 360 indie. And Jake Phelps was like,
no, it's not.
No, you cannot have that. That just doesn't exist.
Yeah. And in that, you had Sasha.
Yeah.
Who else was in it? I remember Sasha being in it. And
I think Reese.
Yeah. And then there was someone else who rode for Ride at the time. And I cannot remember his name. It's like, I don't know if it's like Ben Graham or I'm getting this like completely mixed up. But what I remember is, because I can remember the board he was riding.
Yeah.
And the footage they had, he came along and he did a front side air indie crossbone off like a little hip, okay? And it looked the absolute nuts, right? So then we get to Whistler. We get to Les Arcs. I've got the brushy, so I've gone through quite a few boards by this time.
Yeah, you've always been a bit of a board destroyer, haven't you?
Yeah.
As well?
So I had the Rosinov giant ski. Couldn't get rid of that quick enough, really, because it just looked like a giant ski. Then I got a Liquid, which I cracked the sidewall.
That's right.
And then had to take that back to Esprit de Keep in London, which was then where I first met Pete Turvey.
But you know that office is what became Fabric.
Yeah, right, okay, which is hilarious because been there a few times. And then I had a ride, and anyway, and eventually got to this brushy, and it was like I'd wanted a Burton forever, and there was always like this chance, so you might be able to get a end of season Burton if you knew the right person and you got in quick. I finally got this brushy, and it was like a thing of beauty, and then got to Les Arcs, went riding, and we got off the top of, I think it's 69, the lift 69.
Yep.
And there, or over in Paisley Way or whatever, and there was just like a little hip, like at the bottom of a, a lift pole.
Yeah.
What is it? Whatever that's called. And it's where the snow had ramped up, and I went off it, and I did a frontside indie crossbone, and it felt exactly like it looked in that episode of Bored Stupid.
Yeah.
And then it was like, that is it.
Yeah.
It's on. Like, just the feeling of having seen something and then do it, and it just, the two combined, it hasn't actually happened that many times that I've been snowboarding, but that just changed everything. And then it was just like, right, let's go. Like, what's the next trick to learn? What else can we jump off? And that's, just the progression, like every day you could go out and just mess around and you would learn something. Yeah. And there were no like, it wasn't like you were getting it right or wrong. It was just like, what do you want to learn? Like, I want to grab the board like this. I want to tweak my leg like that. I just want to do it my way. And you could.
Yeah. I think you saw it. Well, from my perspective, it certainly seemed that you wanted to learn stuff. I think for me, it was like, I'm already winning because I'm not in Crayford anymore. I'm doing this. I'm doing it at whatever level. Like, I enjoyed doing stuff, tricks, and sort of learning things, but I didn't have that kind of innate nature to sort of throw myself off massive cliffs and stuff, because that wasn't what I was in it for. Whereas you seem to have a bit more fire to be like, I want to push this as far as I can go.
Yeah, I mean, there was never any thought of like, at that point, there was not a thought of like anything other than what are the possibilities. Like, I can just jump off that cat track and just do a 360 or whatever, like, just grab it. I can just jump off everything. I can literally jump off everything. I think coming from a skateboarding background and a BMX background, which I'd sort of done previously, skateboarding I found really difficult.
Yeah, I think everyone does.
And all of a sudden, I can get that feeling, but on a snowboard, because it's easy, because it's like your feet are strapped to it, so there's no technique in it whatsoever, really. You know what I mean? And it's like I'm airborne and I'm grabbing the board, and I feel like I'm smashing it. And then you've got like the BMXing, I would jump BMXing, but like doing tricks on BMXs, I always found really difficult. So now I'm jumping and I'm doing tricks, and I can do a 180 or I can do a 360, and it was all coming so quickly and easy. Yeah. It was just like intoxicating. Like, oh, okay, right, I'm going to do a backside 180, but I'm going to grab it here, or I'm going to do another backside 180 and grab it there. It's all of a sudden, you learn how to do a backside 180 and you just can do like 10 more tricks because you can grab it in different places or like shifty it or yeah. So it was like every day you were just learning more and more and more, and it was like something that I'd never experienced, and it was like totally addictive.
So your first season was living with Jamie Baker and Stu Brass in Borg, is that right?
Simon Brass.
Sorry. Imagine making that mistake.
God, what are the chances?
For the listener, we'll throw back to that at some point in the series, the Stu, Si, Chris, Dave thing. But we'll get back to that. Anyway, enough rambling. Yeah, so that was your first season. How old? Oh, see, that's the thing. I was like...
No, so that wasn't my first season. So my first season, or attempted season, was I dropped out of photography college and I went to Les Arcs with Andy and Matt Davis. And we had an apartment.
You were already there, weren't you?
We had an apartment, and we thought we were there for the season, but the apartment fell through at some point, so we were only there for a month. And I ended up coming back at the end of that, and they went off to Courchevel and did finish the season. So that was like the first attempt. Bourg Saint Maurice, which was then the next year, was the second attempt. And that was with Jamie Baker and Si Brass. And it's quite funny because I'd not really met either of them. Yeah, this is what's so random about these things, is because it's like I'd met, when I went out to do the first season with Matt and Andy Davis, I got the train all the way there to Bourg Saint Maurice. And then there was a contingent of people, British people in Bourg Saint Maurice. So like Chris Moran, Stu Brass, Steve Bailey, Matt Lowbridge. Anyway, so I knew where they lived, and the idea was that I was going to go and spend the night there before I went up.
That's right.
Up to Les Arcs. So I got there, met Matt Lowbridge in the stairwell. He helped bring all my stuff up. Stayed there the night, and then went up. So I'd sort of, I just sort of, touched on like that 35 Rue des Autaux, which is like quite a famous address in British history, snowboarding for Bourg Saint Maurice, because basically anyone that's lived in Bourg has pretty much stayed there in the early years. Yeah. So we ended up in like one of the small apartments because Stu knew Madame Morel, who ran those apartments. So I'm guessing Si got the apartment, and then he needed people to live with. Yeah. So I jumped on and Jamie jumped on. And I think I'd met Si once at Sheffield at the dry slope British champs in Sheffield.
I guess everyone was going around, like there was a sort of tour of competitions, wasn't there, around the dry slope? So there was a sort of definite scene, and you'd see the same people. Yeah,
exactly. And it was just like, basically, we all just wanted to be there. Yeah. And because, although no one knew each other that well, it didn't matter, because we still, like I said earlier, everyone had just a passion for snowboarding. So it's like, it'd be fine. Yeah. Like, who cares? We're just going to go snowboarding every day.
Like Sheffield lot were living upstairs, and then...
So you had like a whole group of people from Sheffield above us. So like Rhys Crabtree, Dan Woodcock, Paul Moore. And then above that, then you had Munson, Kenty. Can't remember who was in there. But then you had so many people coming and going. It was a real hub. Yeah. So there was always people staying and whatnot, and various like goings on in the town, and it was just a good time. Yeah because everyone was just snowboarding every day. That was all. They didn't care about anything else. There was a lot of like, and if the weather was crap, you would just end up, it wasn't a big nightlife in Borg, so it wasn't like,
no, there wasn't really much to do.
So you might like end up going out or something every now and then, but it wasn't like a regular occurrence. No. It was all about snowboarding. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and there's
so-
quite a scene that all, I guess, were all pushing each other as well.
Yeah, and then so that was like the first year, and then we did, living with Si and Jamie, then sort of opened a few doors, like with some of the magazines, I guess, because Si was.
Because you must have been sponsored. You were sponsored in that first season, weren't you already?
No,
Are you sure?
no, I'm not sure.
Because I'm pretty certain I had an airwalk board, and there's no way I would have had an airwalk board if you hadn't have been hooked up with Johnny Weeks already.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, so if I was hooked up with Airwalk at that point, I mean that was a great sponsor. So we were in at the board test in Capron. Like we got to talk about the board test
God,
because
there's so many things that I haven't just completely slipped my mind.
So the board test in Capron. I mean, you didn't even really need to go there, but again, it was just another trip where everyone would go,
Yeah.
and it was like, right, well, if everyone else is going, I'm going as well.
It's like silly season, isn't it?
So
It's just like everyone's on holiday because there's not actually that much work to be done. There's a few people working, but basically everyone's on holiday.
So we got there, and this is where I met like Mark Munson,
That's right.
Steve Harwood. Like there was a whole. This completely changed my world. Actually, this trip, because everything had been fairly calm up until this point, and then it just went nuts. That trip literally went nuts.
Tell the bouncy castle.
Well, there's so many stories here, and they're not all mine to tell. But like, I think because Capron, I think some of the businesses in Capron, restaurants and that, had enough of us, the British people turning up and just destroying their town. So whatever the bar was with the fountain outside, I think pretty much every night all the plastic furniture ended up in that fountain.
Yeah.
And that is where I got on Airwalk. So Mark Munson was already on Airwalk, yeah? And he introduced me to Johnny Weeks, and I had to down some shots. So, and I downed the shots. I was like, there is nothing stopping me getting on Airwalk tonight if that's all I've got to do. So I downed the shots, and then I was on Airwalk.
That's sweet.
Yeah. And then that the rest of that week was just like, right, I'm on Airwalk now, brilliant. Party time.
Yeah.
So then it's like, right, for some reason we all went for a Chinese meal. We all went out for Chinese. Yeah?
What?
Do you remember?
Yeah, there's only so many restaurants. So, like, you had to, like, each night, you just have to go to a different one.
Yeah.
So the Chinese was always...
So we went for a Chinese, and we got put in a separate room.
We were in the room at the back, weren't we?
Yeah, with a fish tank and the big table with the massive Lazy Susan thing on it. And I cannot remember who was there. I know some people that were there.
Yeah.
But I don't remember everyone. But a massive food fight happened. People were throwing food in the fish tank. We completely trashed that restaurant. We completely trashed that restaurant. And then we left in high spirits. Because we were very pleased with ourselves. And then the river that you walked down next to was like raging, and we were just grabbing street furniture and yeeting it into the river. We were the biggest bunch of wankers.
So bad, isn't it?
Proper Brits abroad.
I know.
But in that moment, you look back and you think that's how bad. But at the moment, it was euphoric.
Yeah. It really was. It was just, it had that element of, you'd seen it from America, like snowboard, like the pro snowboarders tearing it up. And just in that kind of British way, it's like, yeah, we're going to fucking show. They think they know how to do it. Like, we know how to do it.
Yeah.
But not even that consciously, but it was just like everyone G'ing everyone else up.
There was no malice in it whatsoever. No, there was no one got hurt. No one was out to... Except maybe the bouncy castle. There may have been a little bit of malice in the bouncy castle, but...
Well, the waiter sort of teed us up for that, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, but anyway, we'll get to that. But, yeah, there was no malice. It was just, we were out having a good time.
Yeah.
And whatever we thought, literally, if an idea popped into your head, then it happened.
It was on.
Yeah. So yeah, and then one of the nights, we went out for dinner, and... I think we all ordered lasagna or something. There was like 10 lasagnas. Yeah. Everyone wants lasagna. And he came out and he was like, oh, there's only like 4 lasagnas. So everyone's like, oh, okay, all right, well, I'll have. Like, everyone chose something else. And then he brought out 5 lasagnas. He's just said there was only 4, but he's brought out 5. He's
mugging us off.
He's mugging us off. He's doing it on purpose. And it had a bouncy castle next to the restaurant. So I was like, right, the bouncy castle is getting it. So I pocketed one of like the steak knives, and then as we left, I just gave it to the bouncy castle, and then the bouncy castle just slowly deflated, that was like, don't fuck with us, or the bouncy castle gets it.
But back then, it seemed to be like that's what everyone went and did a season. It didn't work. Yeah, it was sort of affordable.
Yeah, well, I guess, you know, especially like I don't know about France. I guess, you know, that was when it was the franc still.
Some of it, yeah.
Yeah, so, or at least for me, it was. And then, so the pound was obviously quite strong against the franc because, or I don't know how we only needed like $3,000 to live there for the whole season. Yeah. And then when we went to Canada, we needed about $5,000. But the pound was so strong against the Canadian dollar. Yeah. So it was like $2 to every pound. So like you're doubling your money basically. And we didn't work, like none of the English lot that was part of that kind of exodus, if you like, or none of us worked. So we'd all saved up money or had a little bit of money from sponsors or a bit of both.
I'd say most of you were sort of sponsored and trying to live the dream, weren't you? There was a few people that sort of tagged along that were just there for the fun of it.
Yeah, I think so.
But it certainly felt like you lot went to Canada because you were like, right, we're gonna up, you know, that's where it's happening. That's where we'll up our game the most.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I think like when you come up on dry slope, you're literally just doing laps, hitting the jump, doing laps, hitting the jump. Yeah. And then when you go to Europe, you know, the parks were renowned to be a bit rubbish.
Inconsistent.
And you would have the odd day where the jump was amazing, like in the park, but most of the time it was you were going off building jumps, free riding, and just riding all over the mountain. And I think for everybody that went to Whistler, and probably similar to the people that were in Breckenridge as well, we were drawn to the park because it was really similar to that. Yeah. That just getting laps in. You know, and even like we would go riding the mountain, but you know, you've got a whole park there that's like groomed every day, that's perfect, and you could just learn. You know what I mean? Like you could just you would start at the top. You'd have like 5 or 6 jumps, then like a perfect half pipe, and then a straight line down to the lift again. You know, and you're doing that every day, and it's I suppose it's a bit more like skate park. Yeah. You know, you're just in the skate park and you're like, right, I want to try this trick. You got like 5 jumps to try it on if you want, or you want to try this trick into this trick. That's what it became. Yeah, right, I'm going to do this into this into this, and that, you know, that's kind of skate-esque as well, isn't it? Like putting a line together rather than it just being about a solo trick.
You still throwing Mickey, do you reckon?
In my head, I could. But whether I could, I reckon I probably could. But there's no pipes anywhere, is there? It's only dropping the shoulder, isn't it, really? So, but I don't know. There's no pipes anywhere. You know, so like where, you know, that's like a real shame. Because it's become, I don't know what it's become, but the average person doesn't get to ride a pipe, do they?
No, or they're so fucking big that you just wouldn't go anywhere near it, even if you're sort of a reasonable rider. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like the thought of, you know, going out to Larks next month and someone said, "Oh yeah, you'd have to try and ride the pipe." It's just like, are you kidding me?
You could.
It's a fucking 22 foot.
Yeah, but you could, couldn't you? But you would literally be riding up it, ollieing. Like you're not getting out. You're just ollieing at the top of the transition.
Ollieing a foot in from the top, just in, and then down again. Yeah, not even out.
No, you wouldn't be getting out. I would love to ride a pipe like that.
Fucking terrifying. Yeah, I was a little bit sad when you went to Canada because I thought we had sort of quite a good few adventures in France, and it was a bit like, oh, he's going to Canada now. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I still had that was the season. Your first season in Canada was when I lived with Munson and Kenton and Tim. And it was just the best. Like the best snowboarding, the best hanging out after snowboarding. But there was a bit of me that's just like, oh, fucking hell, that lot have gone to Canada. I'm a bit gutted about that. But then, you had to do what you had to do. I think until that point, you followed, not necessarily followed me, but we sort of did quite a lot of stuff together.
I think going to Canada, one of the driving factors was Canada was just to try and like become my own person.
Yeah.
I think in the scene it was, and I think probably even today, still we're Chris and Dave and brothers, and people often can't tell which one's who.
Stuart Brass
especially. And I think at that point for me, I was like 18, 19, and I think I was like, right, we've been riding dry slope, doing all the dry slope comps, and travelling around together for 4 or 5 years. And it was like, I think I need to go off and find who I am and what I'm about, rather than having like that, I don't know, safety net of a family member around or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like I need to go out and be my own person. And it was just sick because, being in France with Mark Munson and Mark Kent, we were riding every day. Nick Hamilton, the photographer, would come and stay with us. So we would shoot all the time. But Johnny Weeks obviously had a budget for advertising.
Yeah. And
was working quite closely with Chod and Nick at White Lines. So, I was then getting double page adverts.
Yeah.
At a time where there was not very many British riders getting double page adverts in UK magazines, like it always made sense to me. If you're selling something in England, why would you not? All the brands had loads of riders. Why would you not use photos of your riders? But for some reason, that never really translated. But with Airwalk, I had some sick adverts.
Yeah.
And that meant a lot to me because that meant like the brand were investing in me as well. And then obviously Nick then had an outlet to sell his photos. So then he was happy to work with me. So
Chod designed them as well.
Yeah, Chod designed them, I'm sure. And then so we had this really nice working relationship while I was on Airwalk. Nick liked taking photos of Kenty and Munson and everyone in Borg anyway and around. So he was always around. So we would just do this thing. And then, and then one day Nick turns up. He hadn't been around for a while. He turns up and he gives me this CD. And I'm like, oh, cool, what's this? And then I look at it and it was a compilation CD called Snowboard Generation. And it was sponsored by Airwalk.
Yeah.
And I think it was made by HMV. I don't know. It had something to do with HMV.
Yeah, it's probably one of their like in-house compilations.
Yeah.
Where you just sell a bucket load and make loads of money on
Exactly. And there I am on the cover of this CD.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bloody hell, like this is amazing. Like, wow, I can't believe this. And then later, and then it's like, oh no, there's posters. There's posters of this, and it's all over HMV in England, like all the stores across the country. Yeah. You're on it. You're like everywhere. Like my brother Mike, worked in London, and he went down to like Oxford Street or wherever HMV, and it's like this huge display in the window, and sick. It's like, oh, this is unbelievable, really. So, that was just, that was a real highlight to get that.
Would you say that's like the sort of, in your snowboarding career where you're like, yeah, fucking hell, that's pretty mental? Like, what's the mental moment in your snowboard career? Is it that, or where you just think, how have I got here from Crayford?
Yeah, they say everybody gets like 5 minutes of fame, don't they?
That's what they say. 15, actually.
Well, in my case, it was only 5.
You got another 10 to trade at some point.
Yeah. No, I think that obviously from an exposure point of view, that was by far the biggest thing exposure-wise.
Yeah.
And then we went, that year, the Brits were in Saas-Fee, and that was carnage as well, but there were posters in the bar, and, it was just,
like nutty, you know, and Airwalk had a big house there, and like it was like, well, being on Airwalk was like being treated like royalty. Like, honestly, got so well looked after. Like, I think that whole period was probably the most special, because that did, like, I was on Airwalk as I went to Whistler as well, and I was in Whistler for the first season, I think, before everything at Airwalk kind of disintegrated. So that was probably the most special time in snowboarding for me, you know, where it felt like, wow, look, like
doors are open.
Things are like, cool things are happening. Yeah.
Have you got a moment where you just think, fucking hell, I grew up in this place, didn't like school, but yet here I am, sort of now, like, here I am doing this thing?
No, I don't feel like that. I feel like snowboarding gave me the opportunity to grow as a person, and an opportunity to be somewhere other than where we grew up.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm kind of lucky or grateful or whatever that, you know, that I went down that path.
Yeah.
Because it definitely put me on a different trajectory to what most people that grew up in that area would have had. So you know, without snowboarding, I would be in a very different place. So I guess, you know, I'm grateful that getting into something that was just fun and exciting took me somewhere.
Yeah. For me, snowboarding gave me the means to be somewhere else. It wasn't, I wanted to be somewhere, I wanted to get out of there. Do you know what I mean? And I loved the mountains, and snowboarding was like the reason to be in the mountains, you know. So that's what it was for me. It just gave me that fucking sense of, I'm doing something cool, fun, switches my brain off while I'm doing it. So it gives me respite from myself.
Yeah.
And I get to do it here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think...
So as much as I love dry slope, it was being in the mountains that was the real draw.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, there's, you know, like, yeah, I mean, I don't know how I would have ever ended up in the mount, you know, like, experiencing and being in so many different mountainous areas of the world. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you catch yourself, don't you, at moments, like, you can't predict when it's going to happen, but you'll be somewhere, you know, one that specifically, like, there was always one bit in Whistler where you walk down the high street and then there's just the mountains in the background, and it's like you can't not see them.
Yeah. And
you just think, oh my God, look where I am. But then you can get that all the time, like, you know, just on a chairlift or like halfway down a run, like you go, like, I cannot believe that I'm here in this environment. You know, it's a privilege, isn't it, really, to be in that environment. And it's a million miles away from, like, suburbia. Yeah. And I guess it feels, when you're in that environment, that kind of, like, you know, anything's possible, maybe. Like, if I got here, then I can probably, you know, get anywhere else. Yeah.
So do you feel that now when you go away with the kids? Like, do you sort of have those moments where you're saying, oh, fucking hell, this is cool. This, like, I've sort of done it.
I think now, it's almost like I get vertigo. Like, you know, like
you're getting old, you'll be scared.
Yeah, you'll be on the lift. Like, there's this one particular bit in Morzine where you come up onto the Swiss border, or in Avoriaz, you come up on the Swiss border, and there's, like, my favourite cliff, Bands Cliff. It's like this curve, and it's just beautiful. Yeah, it's so stunning. But it makes you feel so small and so high up that it kind of gives you that sort of vertigo feeling, that it's like, oh, I've got to get down from here, sort of thing, you know? But that is, in itself, that's quite a nice feeling, because it's making you feel kind of as insignificant as you are, really.
Yeah, I know exactly that feeling. I get that if you go out the back of the plan, up the Belcott, I mean, you're fucking high up and you're far away. It's like, if anything, I've got a serious mission to get home. Like, I am out in the wilderness here.
Yeah.
even though, there's one chairlift. But you get that kind of fucking hell. I'm way out here.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. I love that feeling. It sort of scares me, but I like it too.
Yeah, I find that I'm getting older. I get scared of like those like chairlifts. There's always a couple of like horrible chairlifts that
Were you with us when
you
we
think
took...
could collapse at any minute, or like they're so high when they go over like, I don't know, like a valley or something, and it's just like I get really nervous on those now. So I quite like the newer ones, the faster ones that stay quite close to the ground.
Were you with us when Mum and Dad came out to see us in France?
No.
At the chalet, and we took Mum and Dad up the Aiguille Rouge. And so for listeners, my dad's a structural engineer. He took one look at the cable car. I was just like, I'm not getting on that.
Done like a 5-minute assessment in his head.
Like,
and
no, it's fine. Mum was like up for it. I'm going up there. And I'd sort of forgot to mention at the top, you come out onto like this sort of metal...
It's like the cheese grater stuff.
And you can see through it. And up there, when you see through it, you're looking down like 1,000 metres straight down. And she comes out and just like fucking... It was so mean. Like, again, it was one of those, like, I don't think I looked after her quite enough.
No, I mean, this isn't the place for the stories about stitching your parents up, but I got them like horse riding in New Zealand when they were there. That fucked Dad's hip right up. My mum wouldn't do it. And then I got them a helicopter trip in Canada when they were there, and they I think they didn't do it, or they got cancelled or something. Yeah, whenever they go somewhere, I try and organise like an experience for them.
An extreme experience.
But yeah, never goes well.
Oh, bless them.
The Olympics isn't snowboarding. Like for the everyday person, Olympics isn't snowboarding. Like, that's not what it's about. Like, snowboarding in the Olympics and what snowboarding actually is are two completely different things, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I think this is something that we have, like, everybody touches on it a bit. Yeah. And I try, and certainly probably more with Melanie than with anyone else. It's like, what's the experience of somebody watching snowboarding now as they see it? The mainstream media, it's now competitions.
Yeah.
And you might get a bit of something of Travis Rice. But mostly, if you see snowboard on TV now, it's a competition. And it's fucking insane.
Yeah.
Like, it is insane, but is it interesting to watch? Is it insane in the same way that, like, aerial ski jumping is insane, but absolutely no fucker wants to do it?
Well, this is exactly we've never ever talked about this, but this is exactly the same thing that I think about, right?
Right.
Like, I love snowboarding, yeah. I'm not going to be the old fart that says, oh, how many spins do you need to do to make something? Like, how many more 180s can you add on?
Say the classic. The classic.
Oh, well, I'd much rather see a clip.
I'd rather see a floaty backside 180.
Yeah, no, I know. Right, but like, how many 180s can you put on? And I guess the answer to that is it's indefinite. As long as the jump is big enough and you've got someone crazy enough to do it, you can just keep adding 180s on, right? But freestyle skiing, or hot dogging, as it was called.
There's a phrase I haven't heard for a long time.
Was exactly the same. It was this counterculture activity. It had like all this sort of history and kind of fuck the man attitude about it. And then it got into the Olympics and it killed it. Because it got to the point where they're capping how many flips and spins you can do because it's so dangerous. So they're trying to put a safety mechanism in place. So, and then it's coming down to like naught. So everyone's doing the same trick. It's coming down to like 0.2, points. You did it better than this person, but you're all doing the same thing because that's the hardest trick you can do.
Yeah, or certain tricks have a certain point score.
Yeah. So
people know how to, like, what tricks to put together to score a certain amount of points. It's not how you execute the thing. It's just whether you do it or not.
Yeah. And I suppose, and snowboarding is going down, like Olympic snowboarding is going down that road.
Yeah.
Like, because eventually the Olympic committee will say, right, well, we can't make the jumps any bigger because someone will kill themselves.
Yeah.
And when that happens, that's going to change Olympic, competition snowboarding forever. So, although, I love watching the Olympics, I love listening to Tim and Ed do the commentaries, just, the best thing ever. And, seeing Jenny and Billy do what they've achieved is just mind-blowing and phenomenal. And, you're never going to get a better experience watching TV than watching someone someone in your community do something like that and come out on top. Just doesn't get any better than that.
No, that still gives me shivers if I think about it.
But that isn't what snowboarding is. Snowboarding's got nothing to do with that, really. Do you know what I mean? And like you say, when you see snowboarding on TV now, it is only that. There's no lifestyle stuff. There's no culture stuff.
No.
So, for my kids seeing it, well, they don't see it because we don't watch it. It's never on.
Do you never sit down to watch a new movie together? Or
Never. Right, so they've come to it from a point of view of knowing that I used to snowboard, and then they've sort of seen a few photos and bits and pieces, and they've sort of thought, I'd quite like to try that.
When you get your portfolio out and sit down in between them, come on, children.
This is check out what your dad used to be like.
Look how rad I used to be.
The thing is now, you look back and you've got all these fond memories, and you look back and you just realise how shit you were. And you tell yourself it was 20 years ago or 25 years ago, and that, but you still it was still shit. Anyway, so they come to, so it's almost better not to see any snowboarding.
Yeah.
To get into it than it is to witness the Olympics or
just to go and
competition.
literally experience
because going to the mountains is brilliant.
Yeah.
Riding a snowboard, I still get loads of joy out of going through the baby park, hitting one of the little boxes, doing a back or front side tail slide or whatever. I don't even know what you would call it because of skateboarding and snowboarding. What's it actually called? But doing a little jib on a box. Or doing an air on a hip, or, I still love doing those things.
Yeah.
And that's attainable for everyone, you know. And then watching your kids do those sorts of things, learning to turn, going down the slope, that's just as gratifying as anything I've ever done on a snowboard. So, you've got to differentiate. I think it's really important for people to differentiate those two things. Going snowboarding is a completely different experience and something that's incredibly fun and rewarding and enriching, where the Olympics is a spectacle to be watched.
So, I mean, you've taken your kids out and got them into it insofar as they like doing it.
Yeah.
That's one of the things they want to do every year. They want to go snowboarding.
They asked to go, so then we took them.
So say for instance, someone like me, who does have kids, kind of wants to take them, doesn't want to. I fucking knew a postman would interrupt us. It happens every time.
Nice one, man.
Yeah.
Christmas presents turning up. Chris Moran's gate crashed my podcast. Fuck you off.
We get all these posters.
Every time I do one in here, it seems a parcel turns up for him. He's projecting himself in here. What would you say to me, for instance, or what advice could you give me for someone with some kids who wants to take them, obviously is aware of the expense, what it costs. I can go snowboarding for cheap. I can go and sleep on a friend's floor, possibly even borrow a lift. Do you know what I mean? Do it on the snide a little bit, do it cheap.
Yeah.
Taking your family away is a different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
And how to introduce them to it so it's not we've got to go and do 8 hours on the mountain because we've paid for it sort of thing. How to get them into it without sort of pressuring them into it.
Well, that comes down to you or the person as a, I've seen definitely when we've gone away with the kids, I've seen parents losing their shit, at their kids. Yeah?
It's definitely me.
Right. and like they're that pressure to like, I don't know, be better than they are.
Yeah.
And just taking all the fun away from it. I think, you know, it is an expensive holiday. There are ways of making it cheaper, depending on where you go, where you stay, whether you share with other people or not. You know, if you can get a little crew of you together, you can offer, you know, actually accommodation doesn't need to be that expensive.
Yeah.
And if you go at the right time of year, I mean, if you've got kids, don't go in the middle of winter. Do you know what I mean? They'll be freezing. They'll have a crap time probably. But like, if they're being introduced to it, you want them just to be in the snow and have fun in the snow, and have fun in the snow with them. But you know, from our when you're, you know, from our point of view, or people that have snowboarded for a long time, like your guests on this, I think that can be quite a tricky transition from going snowboarding to going on a winter holiday with your family.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. Like, don't expect to get many runs in. Yeah. If you go with a group, then you can take it in turns.
Yeah.
So you do get more runs in. And as the kids get better, it opens up, the more and more of the mountain opens up. But we're on like year 3 and the kids can turn and they're quite adventurous. They're fine on the lifts and stuff like that. So that we're beginning to get further out into the ski area. But it's not, you're stopping for lunch, you're stopping for hot chocolates, you're messing around, you know, you're messing around in the snow, you're digging igloos, you're sledging on your, you know, you're messing around. And actually, if you can let yourself do that, it's lovely. Because there's more to being there than there is just snowboarding.
Yeah.
You know, I know but that's just one activity. There's lots of other things that you do, just messing around in the snow, that kids will enjoy just as much as.
And you took your kids to the snow dome, or the snow centre, I think it's called, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
in
also
Hemel.
the dry slope.
Yeah.
Is it worth doing that to get a few lessons under their belt?
I think like what that does, right? So we took the kids to Hemel, and they had a lesson at Hemel, and they basically, the first lesson was just scooting around on a board. Yeah?
Yeah.
I don't think they came down the slope. They literally just scooted around for an hour.
Yeah.
So for my, like, what I would say is that doesn't need to be done. You don't need to spend like however many, you know, 60, 70 quid to do that.
Yeah.
But like but getting them like going to the local dry slope, getting them to put the kit on, scoot around. The local dry slope gives them an idea of like what it's like to have a board on their feet.
Yeah.
They're not gonna, you know, like Knockhatch, which is closer to us, it can be quite slow. And if you're small, then you don't have enough weight to build momentum. So you're literally just stuck to the slope.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless it's wet. So, and then even then, like, you know, like Travis went and he hardly had it. He'd hardly been on a snowboard, and he got to the top of the slope and he literally straight lined it the whole slope. And he wasn't going particularly fast, but he just straight lined it because if he didn't, he would stop.
He wouldn't get.
Yeah, so he's not giving him like a real intuition on what snowboarding is, but it's getting them used to the kit.
Yeah.
And what that feels like. And then obviously once you get on snow, it's like super slippy.
Yeah.
So it's then, but go to the nursery slopes and just, you know, when we've done it, we've all gone to the nursery slope. We've just taken some lunch with us, just put our bags at the bottom of the lift, and like you use the magic carpet, and you just help that, you know, you're walking down helping them, and you just step by step. Do you know what I mean? Heels, toes, bit of falling leaf, then let them do it on their own, and then start to help them put the turns in. And because at least in Morzine, like the magic carpet run is really flat.
Yeah.
So they can be linking turns, you know, quite quickly, because it's not particularly intimidating. Because if you go flat out, you end up stopping anyway, you know. So they're the sorts of things that I'd recommend, and often the flying carpets or the magic carpets are free.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily need lift tickets. But what I would say is that what you get out of watching them progress, and if you can keep yourself controlled enough to actually
go through that experience with your kids and give them what they need, it's really rewarding. And, you know, from my point of view, you know, I've said it before, but it's probably some of the best days, you know, like there's probably like a handful of best days of snowboarding, and watching them link turns was like by far, it's definitely in the top 5, you know. Top five.
Sick.
Yeah. So I would say do it.
You invested in Greystone, which is the action sports sort of training facility in Manchester.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a place that's trying to, they got foam pits and shit, so there must be some sort of snowboarding aerial thing. Why did you feel like you wanted to invest in that? Well,
the thing is, so like when I find like sort of, so when I drifted away from snowboarding, it's not that I hadn't sort of, I had fallen out of love with it a little bit, but I still had a lot of love for board sports and action sports in general. And then I was trying, I basically wrote this business plan to create a Woodward type facility in England, right? And I went through it and I was like, no, can't make it financially. I just cannot make this work. Like, you know, I was going through it. I was trying to find venues. And I was just like, this is going to be like, you know, I'm going to have to invest millions into this. And I don't know if I can raise millions. You know, I try not to put any barriers in front of myself, but like trying to raise a lot of money for an unproven concept in England could be considered quite a feat. So I was doing all this research, and I started seeing these little snippets about Greystone. And then, you know, and then it was like, oh, I saw that they had a thing, and then they were doing like a crowdfunder and all of this. And I thought, all right, well, I'll reach out to them and see what they're doing. So I reached out, I met Ben. We met Ben like locally, and we had a drink and we had a chat through, and he sort of told me what he wanted to do or what they were trying to do. I mean, by that point, they'd actually had the site, so it was kind of what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, there's not going to be 2 of these. You know, there's not going to be like 2 major like brands doing this in the UK. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to be like my version and their version. So rather than me trying to invest, like, you know, remortgage my house and reinvest, you know, everything, risk everything, why don't I just give them some money? And I had some money.
Yeah.
So I decided to invest in it. And the reason for that is because, you know, like as I was coming up, I was part of the junior Olympic development team and all of these different things. And I went away, we went on trips, we got training, we got opportunities to go to different countries, to work with different coaches, to meet for other riders, you know, from different countries. You know, we got like all these different opportunities. And that meant an awful lot to me at that point because, you know, coming from, you know, like the school background, which wasn't particularly suitable for me, this was something that I was, whether you would use the word excelling at, but I was doing well at it. And the thing about, you know, like Greystone is that that facility potentially gives other people the opportunity to have some similar experiences and to gain or get support or have an environment where they can improve their skills. So, you know, there wasn't going to be, you know, loads of them, you know, different ones all over the country. Maybe there'll be different Greystones. That's the goal. There will be different Greystones all over the country. But I don't think, from my point of view, it was like, right, I'm probably better off backing these guys than I am trying to do it on my own. And, you know, it was their 5th birthday. So I invested about 5 years ago. They've got to 5 years. You know, they've had like They had the first British skateboard champs there that was on BBC.
Yeah,
They've got loads of different events. They get loads of media coverage. You've got people like Katie Ormerod who does loads of trampolining and stuff there for her training. I'm pretty much sure, most people go through there at some point, and they've got like the snowboards with the wheels on into the foam pit. I haven't tried them yet. I'm still, maybe I've missed that boat, but they're doing great things, and they've managed to get through what's been like a really hard, they've had COVID. Yeah, so they just opened and they were open for a bit and then COVID happened. So that's basically 2 years of that, messed them around. And then you've got like the recession. So, the fact that they've got to 5 years is amazing, and like we're just hopeful that over the next few years we can they're going to push the brand and, I can give them some moral support from the sidelines or whatever. But yeah, I think, those sort of facilities, other countries have those facilities for their athletes, and I think it's really important that we have that sort of facility, and we will have one, and we've got one, and I'm really stoked to be part of that.
Yeah, that's cool. So just to finish up then, what does snowboarding mean to you now?
Snowboarding to me now, it's funny because I'm probably frothing more this year than I have in the last 10 years.
I love the fact that everybody's using the word frothing to
Well,
go snowboarding.
yeah, because that's like what the kids say, isn't it? Yeah. So, yeah, we're frothing. And that's been because of the kids.
Right.
Yeah, they've totally brought my love of snowboarding back. Just watching them enjoy themselves and have fun in the mountains, and it's not just like I said earlier, it's not just about snowboarding, it's about everything, just about having fun with your family, friends, messing around, being free in that environment is precious. And I hope that by doing it now, this will become like an annual thing. Even as the kids get older, we will come together as a group for a week, a year or something somewhere in the mountains to just hang out and go snowboarding together. So for me, it's like now snowboarding is almost more important to me now than it was, because I see it as a way of reconnecting with the whole family.
Amen to that. Thank you, Dave, for coming over and doing that with me. It felt a bit awkward at first, trying to balance being a podcast host and asking sensible questions with just me and Dave chatting for 4 hours or whatever it ended up being. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that it wasn't a bit self-indulgent getting my brother on, but he's an interesting guy that is a great, great snowboarder. He's got the best style and has been my favourite person to snowboard with forever. So hopefully we'll get to go snowboarding together one day fairly soon. Relive some of those old times and have some new ones. So yeah, Happy New Year. Hope 2024 is treating you all right. I'm certainly glad to be out the other side of Christmas. I find it quite full on, but it's been a good one this year and pretty reasonable. And yeah, we're now in 24 and thoughts are turning to snowboarding and getting away. There's some chatter about going to the Larks Open in a couple of weeks' time and doing some bits and pieces there, which I am very excited about. Former guest Ed Lee, he's going to be over there with Tim Warwood, Henry Jackson. Going to try and get him on. Tom Kingsnorth, who is next week's guest, he's going to be over there repping Transform Gloves. Going to be quite a lot of people. And yeah, I'm going to be doing maybe some stuff for the Reason magazine, which is a brilliant magazine put together by Ian Sampson. You'll have heard Eddie Spearing last week talking and dropped Ian's name a few times. Well, he's still editor in charge of the Reason magazine, and it's a beautiful put together thing. You can pick it up in W.H. Smith's, I think, and you get free. I think they've even got a free neck warmer. They've got some product guides in there, and it's just a beautiful thing to leave I don't know. I think mine lives in my toilet. So instead of looking at your phone, you can look at some beautiful images of snowboarding. And wouldn't that be a great thing if we all did that rather than staring at our phones all the time? So, yes, the Reason magazine, go check that out. There'll be a link in the show notes, as always. The music at the top of the show is by a band called Helmet, and no giggling at the back. And the song is called Biscuits for Smut, and it's the Mutt Mix, which isn't the film I was going to talk about this week, but Dave requested this song, and I've got it on 12 because I'm also a DJ and music producer when I'm not making this podcast. And I put together this thing a few years ago called the Ultimate Snowboard Soundtrack, and I'll post a link to that as well. And that track featured in that, but it's also featured in the movie The Garden that we've already talked about and is actually up on our YouTube channel right now. You can find that at Thank You Snowboarding. And Dave requested that song, and I had it on 12, and you'll see on Instagram, which is also Thank You Snowboarding Podcast, a picture of him holding that 12 in the studio, my own studio where I produce this podcast called Goldtone Studio. If you need podcasting or music production, then you can give me a shout. Right, but that's enough self-promotion. Yeah, so the movie that, I don't know if I edited it out, but certainly a movie that me and Dave used to watch religiously was, basically it was a Moody copy, and it had Critical Conditions and Snowboarders in Exile on it. And we used to just watch that over and over again. And it would certainly inform a large part of his style. I'm not going to say that I've got much style on a snowboard, but certainly influences his style. And so that's up on that's at the top of the playlist on our YouTube channel at Thank You Snowboarding. I think I mentioned that I chucked a load of the Lockdown Projects movies up on the YouTube channel the other day. And we've got some other bits and pieces up there as well. So if you are looking for some inspiration for shredding, then yeah, go and check that out. Yeah, and our Instagram as well. Our Instagram's growing. I've also been cross-posting a lot into the UK Snowboard History Facebook group. Great thing about Dendex in there the other day that's had loads and loads of people telling us their stories about Dendex, which is really fun, really fun. Massive arse bruises, I think, is the main theme. And and that's been cool. Some people have been emailing in. Stuart Klauser emailed in to tell us a bit about his history, and I think he's just done a year in Morzine with his family, and it's good to hear that people are still getting out there and putting snowboarding into their family lives and, sort of prioritizing it. And yeah, thanks, Stuart, for getting in touch and telling us that. I think I recognize your name from Dry Slope, so we may have met before. And if we have, then I hope you're doing well. I haven't replied to your email yet, but I will do. Anything else going on? I see that the Snowboard Asylum, obviously they support this podcast. They've been putting some stuff up about Volcom outerwear that looks rather nice, featuring Brian Aguchi in the adverts. If you are listening at Volcom, I might be going snowboarding in a couple of weeks if you fancied hooking me up. Actually, Volcom did used to hook us up when we had the chalet, and we had some Volcom beanbags, which were really cool. I don't know what happened to them. I think the dog used to sleep on them, and it eventually got really minging, so we threw it away. But yeah, we used to rep Volcom. Their stuff's great. I've got still got a pair of their waterproof denim snowboard pants, which I love, and I will be wearing if I go out to Lux in a couple of weeks. But yeah, you can go and check those guys out. We're not hooked up with Volcom, but certainly if you want to hook us up, that wouldn't be so bad. Having some great conversations with people, and got loads more episodes coming. Next week is going to be Tom Kingsnorth, who is heading up Transform Gloves. I know Tom from when he was 11 and used to ride at our local dry slope in Bromley, and that sort of ties in nicely with Dave's episode, really. And that was a really fun conversation. So look forward to that next week. Other than that, just the usual. If you can obviously like and subscribe if you're not already, if you can put us a review on certainly Apple Music and Spotify or wherever lets you leave a review, wherever you get your podcasts from, that would be much appreciated. the more kind of feedback, the more response we get, means the more likelihood we can dive even deeper and keep this going longer and longer and longer. Because there are loads of stories to tell and people coming out of the woodwork to kind of say, hey, what about me? I did this thing. And it's like, wow, I didn't know that. So the more episodes we get to do, the more fun and interesting stories we can uncover. So yeah, all that is appreciated. Like and subscribe, share it with your friends, all that kind of business. And yeah, so I think that's it for now. As I said, Happy New Year from everyone at Thank You Snowboarding, me and Shannon at the TSA. And yeah, we'll see you next week around about the same time. Till then, thank you, snowboarding. Peace.